Not every American Civil War story ends in a peaceful or heroic way. And here at Antietam, we're going to take you to a spot on the field called the Roulette Farm, a location where a story ends by a soldier being killed by a friend that wasn't even on the opposing side. And we're going to talk about the 14th Connecticut in the process. Stay with us. This is one heck of a story. Welcome back to History with Waffles. We take you to the places and stand where history happens. That's what we do here on this channel. And today, we're climbing through the Bloody Lane, the infamous location where all the photographs are taken of the dead bodies in the lane here at Antietam. And we're going over towards the 14th Connecticut's monument right now to tell a story about a soldier that was fighting out here with the 14th Connecticut and had joined not too long before the fight. That soldier writes a letter back home, but that letter is not discovered until many, many years later in a pile of documents that they thought was trash. If you like what we do here on this channel and you like seeing videos about places that most content creators don't visit and stories they don't tell, subscribe to our channel. We'll take you to those places. The terrain we're walking out here is the exact terrain, the exact way that the 14th Connecticut would have seen it, minus the roads, of course. We're out here for a beautiful sunrise this morning in Antietam, and the film festival in Gettysburg has just concluded yesterday. I thought it was important to cover some of these stories out here in Antietam while we were out and about, because there's probably a million videos about the Battle of Gettysburg. But the amount of videos about the Battle of Antietam are probably slightly less. Matter of fact, they're terribly less. This beautiful open field here is part of the Roulette Farm. And the 14th Connecticut has a marker out here that we're walking to right now. You can see it from the visitor center, which is just ahead. And this is their monument in the distance from the Roulette farmhouse. So on the side of this monument here for the 14th Connecticut it tells you when they were mustered in and the men total that were fighting here. And it says Regiment mustered August 23rd, 1862 with 1,015 men. Recruits 697 men total, 1712. Battle record from Antietam to Appomattox. They talk about the engaged, the killed and mortally wounded, discharged for disability, which is kind of unique. I don't remember seeing too many monuments that talk about being discharged for disability. State of Connecticut, erected here in 1894. That's an interesting date. This monument stands on the line of companies B and G near the left of the regiment. In this battle, the regiment lost 38 killed and mortally wounded, 88 wounded, and 21 reported missing. And then it tells the story of the battle right here on the front. Advanced to this point in the charge about 9:30 a.m., September 17th, 1862. Then fell back 88 yards to a cornfield fence and held a position heavily engaged nearly 2 hours. Then was sent to the support of the 1st Brigade of its division at the Roulette Lane 2 hours. Then was sent to the extreme left of the 1st Division of this corps to support a Brooks Brigade, and at 5 p.m. was placed in support between the brigades of Caldwell and Marr of that division, overlooking Bloody Lane, holding position there until 10 a.m. on the 19th when relieved. That is a whole lot to put on a monument, and it's a whole lot to break down here in the field. But what the most important thing to know is that they were engaged here with French and all of them coming in this direction, heading towards that so-called Bloody Lane or Sunken Road. This was one of the most devastating places on the field. It was the 2nd deadliest location in all of the Battle of Antietam. The primary deadly location lies over there, just over that hill, and it was Miller's cornfield. That's where the most men were lost. But this place was hotly contested, thanks to the fight that the Confederates put up here and the superior position to be defended, which was this lane running through here. And had it not been for a few mistakes in this position, it is possible the Confederates would have held that lane all afternoon. But as the men are coming up over the rises here and approaching those positions, they're being picked off by sharpshooters, by standard rifles and cannons that are firing from these lanes and that hill just beyond, because there's artillery placed out here on this hill as well. And there's converging fire in some locations as well. You can see the commanding position, which is over there at the Visitor Center, and that's where the infamous picture of the cannoneers from the Confederacy are lying in a straight line across from the Dunkard Church. Well, part of those killed and mortally wounded here in Antietam would be 2 soldiers from the 14th Connecticut. But those 2 soldiers were not killed by Confederate soldiers. They were not killed as a result of shrapnel. They were killed by friends in arms, combatants who were in their own units. Why and how that happened? Well, we'll talk more about that when we get down to the Roulette Farm. So sometime in the late 1800s, I want to say it was 1893, a letter was found in a pile of documents that were donated. It was thought that those documents were worthless. It was basically scrap paper, stuff that people didn't want, and that could be thrown away. In those documents just happened to be a letter from a soldier from the 14th Connecticut, and it was a letter back home. This soldier was writing back home to his brother, and he was telling him the reasons why he had decided to leave home even though his parents didn't want him to go. This man was a 30-year-old man, mind you. But his folks didn't want him to go off to war, neither did his brother, and he was explaining his passion, his reason for doing it. And primarily the letter talks about not wanting to see the government overthrown by the rebel army, not wanting to see the United States being overthrown or taken over by the rebel army. There was no mention in there that I know of anything else being the primary concern other than his concern for his country as he put it. So, with that, he explains, oh, freedom, in an exclamation point about how they should not let freedom fall. Freedom of this country. Well, he then tells his brother that he doesn't want his brother to go to combat in the letter. That he wants his brother to stay home with his aging parents and to take care of them. So it's kind of strange. The man ardently talks about how he feels so passionately that he would feel wrong for not going to combat, but yet, oh brother, please don't go to combat so that you can take care of the old folks back home, so that I can go out here on this great adventure. Hubbard is the man, Private Hubbard, from the 14th Connecticut. Private Hubbard was an adventurous soul. He ends up on a venture out in California during the gold rush. Somehow he ends up finding his way to Kansas. He's also all over the place, as far as I can tell, with his travels. And he ends up in the 14th Connecticut, fighting with them. The letter was dated in August of 1862. This is prior to going into combat over here in September of that same year. So imagine the time frame here. These men that are coming into combat in this location are extremely green. A lot of them maybe not even have held a rifle in the entire time of their livelihoods. Some of them teenagers and have never held a rifle. And they get out here to this field and they're expected to pick up the rifle after maybe a month's worth of training and go into combat with their rifles half cocked and not accidentally kill somebody else in the process. It's a recipe for disaster, and disaster breaks right here at the Roulette Farm. Just right over here. So how does it happen and where does it happen? Well, we're not exactly sure where it happens. There is one account by a man named, well, I don't really know what his name is, honestly, but there's one soldier's account that wrote about the accidental discharge of a gun. And he said that they were in their lines of battle and they were getting prepared to go into combat. And they were warned by their officer, I believe it was Gibbons at the time. I think that was the name of the officer. I'll have to look into it. But they were warned by their officer not to handle their guns improperly. And as they're getting up off the ground, a young soldier accidentally discharges his gun, likely somewhere out here, because it mentions this farm, the Roulette Farm. When the gun goes off, it shoots Hubbard, likely in the back, and the soldier who wrote the letter talks about him undulating in pain on the ground as he's being shot. And then the officer has him carted off of this field almost immediately so that he can get work done. Unfortunately for Hubbard, that's the end. That's the last breath he'll ever draw. That bullet goes through his body and kills him here on this field without even having gone up there, to my best recollection, and fight against the enemy over there on the bloody lane. And his glorious talk in his letters amounted to essentially being shot and killed by one of his own comrades. He wasn't the only one in 14th Connecticut that happened to. There was another young man by the name of Thaddeus who was out here, and I think he was in Company B. And Thaddeus was also shot and killed by another soldier in his own company who accidentally discharged his gun. And it was because they were mishandling their weapons. You got to understand, these guys were green at the time. They weren't very well trained combat soldiers. They were just men that wanted to join the army and be a part of this great adventure that they talked about. and come out here and defend democracy and freedom and all that stuff. But what they found when they got to these fields was anything but that. The glorious talks that you see in some of these letters and diaries and writings that go back home in the newspapers of the time, it's a very different reality for each individual that fights out here on these fields. Some men come back from this with a distaste in their mouth for what they've seen and what they witnessed other people do to each other and what they've had to do to other people. People were mutilating and murdering each other whole stock out here on this field in Antietam. It was the largest casualty count on a single day on any battlefield for America. So there's a lot of dead and wounded people out here. And there's descriptions here at the Bloody Lane talking about men, hundreds of them laying dead on the ground. And then on top of that, many of them crawling back to their lines helpless because of the wounds that they have. This isn't some glorious thing. This isn't something to write home to mama about how brave and safe everybody is. It's war. War is hell. These people are dying out here. And unfortunately for Hubbard, he was killed by one of his own men. It's a sad story. And it doesn't end there. The sadness continues. So the position that we are in right now, you can see the Roulette Farm over here, the line of trees. The famed Irish Brigade is going to come across this field, Marr placing over here in one of these directional areas. There's that tower that you can go up and see the entire field and the rolling hills. And this is the lane for the Roulette Farm. And Bloody Lane lies ahead just off in this direction here. The 14th Connecticut Monument is right up there on that hill, and the Visitor Center is dead ahead right there. Going past this hill and up and over is the Mama's Farm, and you will also see Miller's Cornfield way off in the distance once you get up on top of that hill. That is kind of where we're at in this position for 14th Connecticut. This is one heck of a place for those soldiers to be. Now, don't get it twisted. 14th Connecticut was fully involved over here, and there was a lot of fighting going on, and a lot of those soldiers definitely saw combat out here going towards the Bloody Lane. Some of the worst combat on the field possible. But for poor Hubbard, he pretty much lost his life here at the hands of one of his own friends. So you remember earlier I said that the sadness doesn't end there. Well, the very officer that warned these soldiers about handling their guns, that officer would be laid to rest on the exact same day as Hubbard would be laid to rest back home. He died at the Battle of Fredericksburg. Thaddeus, the other soldier I talked about, he dies out here. 700 men, estimation, are buried out here in these fields for the Roulette Farm from the soldiers in the surrounding area that fought on this field. But there's one other person that dies out here, and it's just a few weeks after the battle, probably as a result of the filth and stench of the soldiers. There's a 21-month-old baby from that farm right there, the Roulette baby. She dies out here and is buried. How do we know this? Well, Hubbard's family writes to the Roulette Farm family and sends them $70 and asks them to have his body pulled out of this ground, put in a coffin, and brought back home safely so that they can bury him in Connecticut, bury him where he's from. They do just that. Not only does he do that, but he writes a letter back to them detailing exactly what he spent the money on, very honest with it, and sent them the additional $15 that he did not spend back to them in the letter. And in that letter, he tells them about how he lost all of his animals, all of his edible food, and above all else, his own 21-month-old baby perishes here as a result of sickness that they think was contracted because of all the influx of people in the town of Antietam. The sadness is great out here in these fields. It's huge. It's not to be overestimated, that's for sure. And everybody suffers when they come through here and this battle takes place. And a lot of these soldiers, for the first time, this was their first real battle in the American Civil War. And what a hell of a battle to be your first real battle. So I absolutely love taking this trail down here through Bloody Lane. And I love these black signs that are posted out front. If you're not that in tune with what happened out here, you can just follow these signs and read them, and for the most part, you get a good visual of the battle that took place out here. Now, Hubbard's in the 14th Connecticut, and just by reading this sign right here, you know the 14th Connecticut was involved here. And it says Morris's brigade relieved Weber's and took position on the rise of ground just north of the Bloody Lane. So here's our Bloody Lane, our rise of ground. It all runs out through here. The 108th New York, east of Roulette's Lane, the 14th Connecticut, and the 130th Pennsylvania, west of it. So Roulette's Lane runs down through here. You have the 108th, and then you have the 14th and the 130th all throughout here. Here supported and afterward reinforced by Kimball's brigade. It maintained a severe contest, losing heavily in killed and wounded. In the latter part of the engagement, the 14th Connecticut was sent to reinforce Richardson's division on the left. When they say left, they're talking about their left. So, like I said, if you don't know much about the fight that happens out here, and how the 14th Connecticut or any of these units are involved, and you don't have a book on hand, when you're walking these trails at these very well marked battlefields like Antietam or Gettysburg, you can simply follow the signs, read the information, and look at the land, which is what we've been doing this morning as we walk this trail to tell Hubbard's story from the 14th Connecticut. Well, I couldn't end the video out here without stopping by the old Irish Brigade monument here for our ardent viewer and a big time supporter, Thomas. He's got his own channel on YouTube right now where he's telling the Irish story He's creating his videos for the first time over there. You should go check him out. But here we are at the Irish Brigade. I love the detail in this thing. You see the soldiers falling, and you can see the one holding the flag. The flag is just riddled with bullet holes all throughout. The explosion of the artillery piece overhead, lead raining down. One soldier's hit from behind and he's falling to the ground. And they have their heads down because there was a description from the Irish Brigade that at one point in time, I know for a fact in Fredericksburg, these soldiers kept their heads down as if they were walking against a storm of hail. So it's a beautiful monument, and it rests here where the Irish Brigade came across in Antietam, just right out there on those fields. It's a beautiful place. Well, it's a sad story out here for Connecticut, especially for Hubbard, the way his life ended, and how not only did his life end, and we have the connection with his officer dying at Fredericksburg and being buried the same day that he was buried at home, the baby dying over here, but then on top of that, his own father doesn't get to attend the funeral because he has a mangled leg. And then eventually, him and his father are buried in the same area in that cemetery. And it's not too long after Hubbard's there that his father's gone. So all around, the American Civil War is filled with sad stories, death, destruction, terrible things. There's nothing glorious about this. A lot of people like to put a spin on these things and tell Napoleonic stories of charges across fields and bravery. Just like when we talk about Pickett's charge, or the confusion that happened on Little Round Top that no one can agree on. None of it is well organized, none of it is perfect, and absolutely none of it is glorious. It is war, it is death, it is murder, and it's all for whatever reason they want to fight. It's humanity at its worst. If you like videos about Antietam and Connecticut, and you want to see some more, at the end credit here, I have another video about the 11th Connecticut over at Rohrbach's Bridge, or Burnside's Bridge, and the fight that happened over there. So click on that video link and go check it out. And make sure you subscribe along the way and make some comments and give us a thumbs up. That stuff means a whole lot to me, and it also keeps my channel going so that I can continue to tell these stories that you like so much. I appreciate you watching this video and being interested in history and interested in the Connecticut story. Until next time, from Antietam, this is History with Waffles.